Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we are back with more TU10 and PTS related stuff, and that is because we have now received the patch notes for PTS Phase 2. While not as extensive as Phase 1's changes, there are some monumental things in here. The big topic for today, as I'm sure you could tell by the title, is the changes to exotics, but that's not the extent of the most notable additions. And while the focus of this video isn't to do this, I do want to note these two components of Phase 2. One is that they further elaborated on the Negotiator's changes, which now sets a 15-meter range between marked targets to be damaged. So if you're standing 16 meters away from another marked target, the two of you can't be procced for the transfer damage. I think this is a really nice change, both to make negotiators a bit more fair, and it should hopefully reduce the NPC cheese that people have enacted with it. Additionally, there'll now be an indication when you're marked, so that's awesome, and they fixed an apparent incorrect scaling with the transfer damage, so you'll now receive the appropriate amount instead of a boosted 250% damage. All these in combination should make the site a lot more fair. The other big thing to note is that incoming repair has finally been fixed. I'm so relieved that they finally did this. Basically, if you didn't know, incoming repair has been dominating and guiding the meta ever since TU8 and Warlords drop, because not only was it increasing the repair gain from skills as intended, it was also boosting any and every medkit, talent, and gear set bonus related to armor gain. It was buffing the True Patriot's healing, boosting Unbreakable up towards 100% armor refunded in PvP, and making Efficient even more OP than it already was thanks to it buffing the talent and the medkit doubly. Now the stat will simply increase the repair you gain from healing skills like it was originally intended to do, and like it should. It buffing all these other aspects of gear has been so fundamentally and degradingly broken and has hindered and shoehorned builds ever since Gear 2.0 dropped. I'm immensely excited for this change. It alone could probably fix a lot of PvP's current issues, and so to have it coming alongside everything else in TU10 is fantastic. If you think this is a bad change, you can come fight me in the comments. I will set up a Change My Mind station at the University of Cheesy PvP. Trust me, this is an awesome fix to finally be coming. Alright, now that we quickly discussed those other two major changes, let's move on to the actual topic of this video, exotics. Several of the exotics in our arsenal have received either a base damage buff, newer reworked functionalities, or in some cases both. I want to go over these and give my thoughts on them because I'm very excited for a lot of them and I think they could have some major potential. Without any further ado, let's get into it. We start with the Bighorn, which I think now is the only exotic I don't have yet. Yeah, I think so, but every day pretty much I've been running a legendary. I'm really trying to grind out and get this one before TU10 drops because this new reworked functionalities and its buff seems really exciting to me, and I really think the gun could have some potential when the update drops. Its changes are the damage has been increased by 11.2%, so that's a nice little buff, and added functionality that provides additional headshot damage. The full talent is now that when scoped switches to semi-automatic firing mode, dealing 450% weapon damage with each shot. That's the same as it is right now, but now headshots grant 1% headshot damage, which stacks up to 50 times, and it resets to 0 at full stacks. So I think this is really good. The one part that's kind of weird is that it resets once you hit 50. There's no like bonus for hitting the top amount of stacks, but you know, whatever. It's definitely nice to be able to stack that much headshot damage while you're firing. I think just as an AR, it could be really nice, and it could pair really well with stuff like Striker, Concussion, and maybe Obliterate. There's some really cool options you could do with this, and so I'm very excited to get it, and then once TU10 drops, mess around with some of these different potentials and combinations. Moving on, the Eagle Bearer has received a 7.8 base damage increase, which I think is a little low. I mean, the Eagle Bearer right now doesn't really stand out a ton among the other things. It definitely has very high base damage when compared to some of the other ARs, but I think it could really use some increased functionalities, kind of like what the Bighorn got. I just think ever since they changed it from how it worked in year one, it's kind of felt a little bit lacking, and it's, you know, no one really uses it specifically for its intended use of, you know, reducing the damage taken. It's definitely a nice bonus, but I don't think anyone really builds around that. So I think they really need to either expand upon that or just give it some increased stuff, kind of like what it had in year one with better damage, or maybe some better accuracy. I don't know. I think it just needs a little bit of something, but the damage buff increase is definitely nice. Now the Chameleon, oh boy, if you were a fan of the Chameleon back in TU7 when it came out and when it was actually pretty good, you should be pretty excited for this. The damage is being increased by 32.8%. That's insane. That's going to bring it up on par with, you know, maybe it's going to be what, 10k or 8k below the FAMAS. It's going to be really nice. And now there's some added functionality that it retains the current buffs when you go to the next combat encounter. So basically when you get out of combat, it should retain the buffs. And that's really huge. I mean, in missions and like PvE stuff, that's going to make it a really efficient gun to be able to take through and just power through to the end. It should be really nice. All of the different bonuses for hitting headshots, body shots, and leg shots are all the same, but that base damage buff and the fact that you can retain the buffs when you're out of combat, that's huge. It should make the gun really nice. The Bullet King has received a 2.6% damage increase. Not really going to be noticeable noticeable at all, but that's nice. The Nemesis, damage increased by 11.1%. That's pretty good. It means the Nemesis should be a bit more viable. I mean, it's good now, but I think it just is outperformed by rifles in general, and I don't think this is going to fix that, but it should make it a bit more viable. The Liberty has some really nice new functionality where now every time you hit a shot, it grants 2% weapon image per stack, and then same as before, you can stack up to 30, and when you hit a headshot, it consumes every stack that you have, repairing the shield for 3% per stack. I think this is a really nice change because it should allow those tank users to do a bit more than just heal up their shield. They can also build up some damage and have a really nice synergy between building up that damage stack and then consuming all those stacks when you need the healing. It should be really fun. Moving on, they have changed some things about the Regulus. They increased the initial bullet accuracy, which is good. I heard some people saying that it bounces side to side a lot, so this should help with that. And additionally, they changed the third attribute bonus from damage to armor to headshot damage, which should be really nice because the whole point of the gun is to get headshot kills to proc that insane explosion. This should help out with that. Moving on to the Merciless, the damage has been increased by 12.5%, and there's an added functionality to provide an extra non-explosive damage. The talent is now that this weapon fires on trigger pull and release just as before. If both bullets hit the same enemy, you gain a stack. So now at 7 stacks, shooting an enemy deals 900% amplified damage, which is new. That's not the explosion. This is a separate thing that's just boosted once you hit that 7 stacks, and then it creates a 7-meter explosion, dealing 1200% weapon damage and consuming the stacks. This is huge. This makes the Merciless just like basically a nuke. If you get those 7 stacks, you can just tag someone and do an insane amount of burst damage. It'll be really nice for taking out things like the Foundry Bulwark, where burst damage is kind of their weakness. This should just be a really nice option to have in our arsenal. Moving on, the Diamondback has received a 7.7% damage increase. That should be nice. Should help make it a bit more viable compared to the M1A, considering the M1A got nerfed by a fair bit, so this should help with that. And the text has been updated to clarify that a new target isn't marked until after the 5-second buff. That's not something new, it's just clarifying what's already in the game now. The Sweet Dreams and Lullaby has had its damage increased by 11%. Don't think it'll make it a lot more used for its actual damage, but for the talent is definitely still good that you can just one-shot a red or purple ad. Still definitely really nice on Legendary and Heroic and that stuff. And so I think it'll still be used for that, but I don't know if the base damage increase will really make it used a lot more for that. The Lady Death has had its damage increased by 18.9%. That's pretty huge. I think that this could make it a lot more viable. I mean, I see a lot of people use it in the Dark Zone now, and so I think this should just help a lot with, even more people using it. It's still going to be lower damage than it is currently with the PvP global modifier changes and the reduced SMG damage overall, but I think this could be really nice to help it stand out among some of the other choices. The Chatterbox has had its damage increased by 16.7%, kind of similar to the Lady Death. I think this should help it be a bit more viable. It'll probably still be a PvE primary gun. I tried to make a PvP build with it the other day, and it just, it's not that good. I mean, you have to have a really situational thing to get all those reloads and to get the extra rate of fire, but I think in PvE, especially this buff should help it be a bit more viable and used, and just have some crazy builds with that, because there is a lot of potential with it. There's a lot of things it can synergize with, and so this should be pretty good. The Ninja Bikes now have some added functionality. Now when you perform a cover-to-cover or vaulting, it not only reloads the drawn weapon, but it grants 25% bonus armor for 5 seconds. That's pretty nice. I think this could make it a lot more used within some builds, because there's definitely some instances where getting the reload is really helpful, but just that on its own isn't that enticing. But now to get the bonus armor as well could pair really well with stuff like Intimidate or something like that. I think that should be really nice. The Dodge City holster has gotten a further buff, and I'm a little bit worried about this, honestly, for PvP. I think it's getting close to the point where it could become a problem, like for the meta, but we'll have to see. The new functionality is that now when you go to consume the buff, whether it's at, 10 stacks or 100, you now deal headshot damage anywhere you hit on the body when you pull out your pistol and hit that first shot. That's pretty huge. It's going to mean that when you build up that 1000% extra damage and you get headshot damage on it, you could hit someone in the body and potentially one-shot them. That's why I'm a little worried with it, but especially in PvE, this will be really nice. I'm a little bit worried about PvP. We'll just have to see how it goes. Next up, the BTSU gloves. I'm really excited for these changes. Now, they did nerf it a fair bit. Now it no longer grants overcharge to your whole group unless they are already at skill tier 6. That's pretty major, because a lot of people were using that in things like the raid and other places to get some really insane synergies and just damage outputs going. So now that's going to be definitely a hindrance. But what I'm personally excited for is they've added a new functionality where it grants 15% hive skill haste per skill tier. And this is going to be huge for healer builds. I'm already super excited to make a healer build with the new future initiative set from the Foundry raid. And so I'm definitely going to be pairing it with these BTSU gloves to make a pretty sick healer build for PvP and PvE. But specifically, that skill haste is just going to help a ton with getting your charges back once you detonate it. Moving on, the Sawyer's knee pads have received a bit of a buff too. They have some new functionality where now you can retain some of those stacks upon moving. So basically, as soon as you build up any stacks when you're standing still, when you move, it now retains those stacks, whatever amount you were, whether you're at 1 or all the way at 10, it retains that for 10 seconds. So that should help a lot with some snipers having to reposition and stuff like that. It should just make these a bit more usable. The Mantis has now had its third bonus attribute changed from crit chance to damage to target out of cover, which makes sense because a lot of the times decoys are going to push people out of cover, so this should help with that. And lastly, the Ravenous has had a bit of a buff. When an enemy with defensive primer stacks on them is killed, you now gain the benefit of those stacks without needing to detonate them first. And I think this is really nice. It makes a lot of sense that if you hit someone with, I don't know, 8 primers and then they die, you're going to get all of that bonus armor and that damage to other armor plates, even though you didn't detonate it yourself. And I think this is really good, and it should help out with the Ravenous's team-wide usage and its utility and that kind of stuff. I'm excited for this change. Okay guys, that's a look at all of the exotic changes implemented with PTS Phase 2 and coming in TU10. I've got to say, I'm hyped for a lot of these. The Bighorn and Chameleon both look like they're going to rise in viability and use, which I'm hyped for because ARs are my jam. And the BTSU edition is fantastic. That's going to change the game for healer builds, and I'm all for it. Also, some of the more subtle ones, like the damage buff to the Lady Death and the functionality buff for the Ravenous, are dope as well. All around, I'm very glad the devs took a look at exotics and buffed where they felt it was needed. I still feel some things like the Eagle Bear could use a bit more love, but overall I'm very pleased with the proposed changes. That's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so that you could be updated every time I upload. Head on down to the comments and let me know what your thoughts are on these changes, as well as some of the other stuff like the outline for negotiators and the massive long-awaited incoming repair fix. I'm very interested to hear what everyone will have to say. Until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.